So we're here at the Red Pill Expo in Spokane, Washington, and we're with Elaine Willman, a high-profile activist who's been involved in all sorts of things, Native American issues, trying to end tribalism in this country, wrote some books which were amazing. Elaine, thank you so much for being with us.
Thank you, Alex. It's just great to be here at the Red Pill Expo and to be here with the New American folks.
Oh.
You're my heroes.
Oh, well, thank you. You are our hero, too. Yeah. We so appreciate what you do. So, Elaine, I wanted to talk to you about a few things. One of the things that you've been working on now is to try to end the hyphenated American phenomena. So tell us a little bit about that.
Absolutely. Well, I've watched over a period of at least the last administration and actually earlier this pitting of one American against another by hyphenating us. We're Hispanic Americans, we're Chinese Americans, we're Native Americans, we're Black Americans. And the previous administration did, I think, an intentional job of pitting one against the other. And we now have things like Black Lives Matter and Antifa and attacks on white people and all kinds of people. So my goal, and I would hope that it would fit in with the current administration in making America great again, is to unhyphenate Americans. And I think a simplistic concept that I would really like to encourage national discussion on is that we take federal funding and it be given to low and poverty threshold households based on simply annual household income, American citizenship, and annual household income. So we don't care what your skin tone is, we don't care what your sexual preference is or ID, or your religion, or your marital status, or anything like that. That we take care of America's low and poverty households with annual household income only. And the federal agencies would pool those monies now targeted for 156 different ethnicities, according to the Census Bureau, pool that money and make it available, not long-term, but at least as a substantial safety net for our families coming off of welfare or trying to get work, a safety net based on annual household income only. What could be more fair? I mean, really, what could be more fair? If they provide their income information, their citizenship status, number of persons in the household, and we leave it to the feds to do the little algorithms about how many persons in this house are eligible for this money. I think it would also dramatically collapse an awful lot of ugly regulations and dramatically downsize an awful lot of desks in federal agencies where you have the Hispanic desk, the Chinese desk, the immigration. You know, when we don't have bloated federal bureaucracies doling out money based on race, I just think we could just be Americans again. Just be Americans again. We couldn't even say that word without it feeling tainted under the previous administration. Now we're Americans, and I want to encourage that we all come together.
Why do you think that they push all these divisions so hard? Why do you think they obsess about African American, Jewish American, Hispanic American, white American? Why do you think they do that?
Oh, it's absolutely divide and conquer. It's you pit one American against the other. This American gets this, you get nothing. It's pitting us against each other as countrymen, as fellow Americans, and it's very intentional. Very intentional. The diversity, which sounds, you know how we have so many things that have a good intention and an ugly consequence? Yeah. The diversity has tipped the scale to a point that is very unhealthy for American citizens, all of us. And I just think we need that healing time, and we need the federal government to come in and support that healing where we're Americans, period. You know, I just really deeply believe that. I also think it would go very far to downsize regulations, downsize government, and put a safety net in place for any American citizen in a household that needs some help. then that would be it.
That's really interesting coming from you. I know you have Native American ancestry, and also your husband, a direct descendant of Sacagawea.
Yes.
That's and yet you're not out there clamoring that, well, I'm a American Indian, therefore you need to give me special money. No. And I know one of the things you've focused on in your work is how Indian policy is actually being used to advance all sorts of bad agendas and objectives. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yes, I can, because there's an enormous amount of taxpayer dollars funding all the basic needs of 567 tribal governments. But I've lived on 3 different reservations for 35 years. Those funds are not going down and reaching the tribal families. They are living in poverty and low income levels. They have drug and crime and child trafficking issues on all these reservations, and yet all these huge dollars are rolling in, and the casino money is extra money, but the poverty and the crime and the quality of life of our tribal families gets worse every year instead of better. Now imagine if a tribal family could be a household and qualify for annual household income and was no longer dependent on a tribal government doing what they should have been doing all along. Imagine if those tribal families, like the rest of us who might have a need, qualified just under annual household income, not because they're Native Americans. That would also give them some improved quality of life, but it would also increase their voice within their own tribal government. They wouldn't be as dependent upon those tribal governments, and we could be full Americans again together. I speak for an awful lot of tribal families, Alex. They have no free speech. They don't have parental rights. They don't have civil rights. They just have to exist. And I think that's terribly unfair. But this whole system has promoted that with no financial accountability coming from these tribal governments. And they're not treating their people right for the most part. They really are not.
I remember I looked into it after talking to you, and there is just so much craziness out there. Your book, I think, documents a lot of the horror show that's happening. So what is the solution in terms of fixing federal Indian policy? I mean, I know it's a complicated question, but what could we do to do that?
It is, and I don't have all of the answers. I have some ideas, just some ideas, but I do believe that it's kind of crazy that tribal governments will go out and buy land at a top dollar, high market value and pay for that land, and then they will give that land free to the federal government to put in trust for them to escape taxes. So the federal government just says, thank you very much. You know, the tribes are donating land they purchase with their money to the federal government, and it is federalizing lands beyond all reason in the western states. And so one of the solutions would be that the federal government gives them their land back. So here's your land back. You might have to pay taxes, but you own that land now. The federal government does not. And that land base would go back into the state governments, under the state jurisdictions. Basically, federal Indian policy, the tribal government system, has been a huge hoax on the American people, has been ill-serving the tribal families, and is just at a point of such disrepair. We have to start thinking out of the box and find a fix. Not going to come overnight, but I think it'll come if we start facing the music, you know.
Yeah. Well, Elaine, thank you so much for what you're doing. Where can people find a copy of your book?
The book, Going to Pieces, and the newer book, Slumbering Thunder, are both available on Amazon.com or Barnes & Noble, all of your book sites.
Okay.
Also, my email, I love to hear from people, is Toppin, T as in Tom, Toppin, Toppin at AOL.com. And I welcome comments and conversation from all over the country, from tribal families and whatnot. I work with a number of tribal people on several. I'm particularly helping tribal families suffering under the Indian Child Welfare Act. There's child trafficking occurring on these reservations. Parents are getting knocks on the door, losing their children. They don't even know where they are. And it's getting really ugly on these reservations.
Wow.
It is. So somebody needs to speak up, and I'm just noisy enough to do it. You know, we need many more. Yeah,
well, Elaine, thank you so much for what you're doing. We really appreciate it.